And we're just glad you're here. Welcome our friends, join us online. How many of you love this season? How many of you loathe it? You're not going to admit that right now, are you? I actually asked someone that this week. I was leaving a fitness center and bumped into somebody that I actually knew from there. And I asked them, I said, do you like this season? You love this season? They said, oh, yeah. And then they said, I just wish that people would live like they do now all year long. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And said, well, can't you just tell people are more joyful? It's like they're really happy to help out. Like people are actually opening doors for you that don't ordinarily open doors. Reminds me, I stopped at a Starbucks this week, and I was going out about the same time a couple other dudes were, and it was like, it was an argument of who was going to hold the door for who. You know what I'm saying? Now, how many of you know that doesn't happen every day? And yet, it's that time of year. And so when this person finished, they said, and people are just so much more generous this time of year. And it's like they're giving. And I said, what are you doing Sunday morning? And they said, well, why? I said, I would like to actually invite you to come to our church to speak. And they like, ain't happening. And most of you are sitting there saying, if you have invited me to come up on the stage to speak, I wouldn't have done it either. Did you know that public speaking is one of the greatest fears that people have? In our culture, in our country anyway, public speaking is one of the number one fears that people have. And you add to that the subject of money, and then on top of that, giving. How many of you are saying, triple no way? So put yourself in my shoes. Guess what I get to do today? I get to speak to you in a public venue, and I'm going to talk to you about the spirit of giving. We're in a series we're calling The Spirit of Christmas, and we launched it a few weeks ago, and we started talking about the whole idea that the role of the Holy Spirit in the Christmas story, and the realization that if it weren't for the Holy Spirit, there wouldn't be a Christmas story. And then that spirit that people say, it's just in the air. You know what I'm saying? It's like you can feel it. I mean, I heard it referenced recently watching a movie, and actually, confession, it was a Hallmark Christmas movie. And a couple of guys, actually it was just last night because I was wrapping gifts for our family get-together and taking care of some stuff. And the movie was on. I sat down to watch, and I was drawn into it. It was Christmas at the Palace. And I thought, we were about to experience that this morning when Ryan stepped up here. Sounded very familiar. Anyway, the whole idea is this concept of the spirit of Christmas, but it's really the Holy Spirit is the one that brings about these expressions of joy, hope. We talked about that last week, the spirit of hope, and today the spirit of giving. Now, I just want to make a couple of comments before we actually get to our text for today, because some of you are thinking, Keith, I wouldn't want to speak on that subject either, and there's probably good reason for that. And yet others of you are saying, I'm not sure I'd want to actually do a whole message on it, but I'd love for somebody to hear the story because it's that whole idea of generosity that's wonderfully and radically transformed my life. And why would you hold back on delivering a message that could really help somebody out and bring life to them? And so, can I just say this? I realize there's quite a range of emotion around this subject. So to address that right up front, money is one of the leading causes of divorce. Statistically, we know that to be true. It's also one of the leading causes of incarceration. It's also one of the leading causes or contributors to anxiety and sometimes even depression and other social ills. All that to say, but I want to just say this, money is not the problem. You're saying, well, it sounds like it to me. No, it's not money that is the problem. It's how we view it and manage it. That's the issue. That's the problem. And in an effort to get all of us back on the same page, because I know if we had a continuum here, some of you would be on this side and say, I wish I could find the exit right now, but if I did, everybody would know why I'm walking out. And others of you are on the other side of this continuum saying, come on, bring it. This is what we need to hear. It is a spirit of giving. It's real. And so to get us all back on the same page, how about we meet somewhere in the middle that I believe we all would agree to, and that is simply this, that there's something that we're all after in life, and we're after the same thing. Would you agree that most every person on this planet is after happiness? Anybody here doesn't want to be happy? I mean, like, anybody sign up for depression today? Probably not, right? And so we're all after happiness. We're after this thing called fulfillment in life. We're after a clear sense of purpose. We're after health and healthy relationships. We all want the same things. And so within the context of that, the question is, how do we get there? Now, here's what conventional thinking tells us, that happiness and fulfillment are found where? They're found in achieving and in acquiring, right? It's sort of the when and then thinking. In other words, when I get this job and have this level of income, then I'll be happy. When I get this much money saved, then I'll be happy. When I get out of debt, then I'll be happy. When I get that house, then I'll be happy. When I get that job, then I'll be happy. When I get that outfit, then I'll be happy. When I get that new watch for Christmas. You fill in the blank with whatever you want, but it's when and then thinking that we think that when I achieve or acquire this, then I'll be happy or fulfilled. In other words, I need just a little bit more of these thing called Benjamins, right? 10 Benjamins. How many of you would like to sign up for that today? My hand's up if you have a few that you aren't using, or you already set it aside for somebody else for Christmas, but really think that you should give it to your pastor because you love him more than you do your family anyway. That's all right. And speaking of giving away, we have a couple of pretty cool bikes up here. We had to do everything we could to restrain kids that were here with their parents when they got here to set up this morning, because they saw this and they're like, I want to ride that. So we're going to give those away before the end of my message. But how many of you know that generosity says that the road to happiness is what? Road to happiness and fulfillment is realized when I can get something, the road to fulfillment we think is when I can get more of these, acquire more, save more, have more. And yet generosity says that the road to happiness is when I give one of those away. Now, before I show you that slide, what is more? All right, let's go with the slide and take one away. So how many of you would say that 10 is more than 9? I'm testing your intellect today. How many of you would say that 10 is more than 9? Right? So that if I earn more and keep the more I have, conventional thinking and wisdom would say that then I have more, and the more I have, are you ready for this? The more happy I'll be, the more fulfilled I'll be. That's conventional thinking, right? Am I right on this? Okay, just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And so what happens then is if you have more, if you don't give, right? In other words, if you're generous, you're going to have less. So I'm going to have more if I don't give. I'm richer if I don't give. I'm poor if I do give. Are we still tracking? Make as much as you can and keep as much as you make. It's just Keith simple math 101. That's the path to happiness. The authors of a book that I was introduced to 2 weeks ago that I've been feverishly reading through, that is a brilliant piece of work called The Paradox of Generosity. And you're saying, are you recommending it? I actually would. They did extensive research to study the impact of generosity in the lives of everyday people like you and me. Just run-of-the-mill people all across the nation, an extensive study, and came away with some interesting findings. They surveyed thousands of people and did in-depth, like 4-hour interviews with scores of people. Once they evaluated their life of generosity, they wanted to look closely at what went beyond just what was in the bank accounts and what kind of savings they had and what kind of investments they had. They wanted to see what their lives looked like in everyday life. And throughout the book, they compare and contrast, are you ready for this, what generosity actually does to people based on, are you ready for this, empirical research. Now, I have a confession to make. My confession is this. I've taught some of the things I'm going to teach you today for years, a couple decades, but I've never had the support and the framework to come at it from like I do today. Some of you know this. I do some executive leadership coaching in the corporate world. I absolutely love it because everything we do is based on research from a biblical world, not the research. We teach and lead and equip and train and coach from biblical worldview, but everything we bring to the conversation is based on research. And today, I'm so excited because I'm going to talk about a subject I've talked about for a long time with the support of empirical research, independent of your religious traditions, your spiritual thinking, or even your biblical worldview. The data supports itself, and it's absolutely powerful and compelling. And so the writers of this book, The Paradox of Generosity, they say, you know what, it doesn't really matter what your spiritual traditions or views are, even on the Bible. The research stands on its own merit. And they looked at generous people who regularly gave their most valuable resources, compared it to those who wouldn't part with their most valuable resources. So we're talking about money, and we're talking about time, and we're talking about our network, we're talking about our relational network, and all of those different things. It's a powerful, compelling argument they make, and they found it in every single dimension that they studied that conventional thinking is absolutely wrong regarding generosity. In fact, people who are the most generous, who give the most consistently of the things that are the most valuable to them, their time and their money, are happier. Are you ready for this? They gave 5 evidences in the world of life. They're happier, they're healthier physically, they have better health, they live with a clear, compelling sense of personal purpose, and they are generally avoid depression and anxiety. They have better relationships, and they experience more personal growth. All 5 of those are the fruit and the byproduct of the generous versus the ones who are ungenerous. It's powerful. Here's the point. How many of you have heard something like this? You just can't buy happiness, but money helps. I have a statement for you today. You can't buy your way to happiness, but we now know through empirical research you can give your way to happiness. I want to say that again. You can't buy your way to happiness, but you can give your way to happiness. You can give your way to a more fulfilling life, a more fruitful life, a more satisfying life, a less depressing life, a less anxious life, a more purpose-driven life. You can give your way into that. And so the argument then in the second chapter is what came first? The generous life that opened the door for all of these beautiful side benefits, or did somebody step into all these benefits and as a result of that become more generous? And there is a little bit of the yin and the yang in both. However, the compelling argument is this, that the generous and generosity is what opens the door to all of these things. And so the question might be, why give? Let me give you just 3 compelling reasons why give, and then we're going to give you 1 point of application today in the context of a powerful story from someone here in our own church family. And the first point is this. When we give, are you ready for this? We get better. We get better. When we give, we get better. In other words, we grow, we benefit. I'm going to share with you a quote now from the book, The Paradox of Generosity. Quote, "Those who give receive back in return. By letting go of some of what we own, we better secure our own lives." I mean, you know, this flies in the face of conventional thinking. By giving, we ourselves move forward and toward flourishing. This is not only a philosophical or religious teaching, it is a sociological fact. The generosity paradox can also be stated in the negative. By grasping onto what we currently have, we lose out on better goods that we might have gained. In holding on to what we possess, we diminish its long-term value to us. End of quote. Now, there's a slide I want to show you, and I'd like to paraphrase what I'm learning in this book with this thought. Give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. Isn't that a powerful thought? I'm like, why didn't somebody say that earlier? Actually, somebody did about 4,000 years ago. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 24 and 25. Give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper, and those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. Here's my point. Don't you love it when science and research, when it's fully investigated and executed, come back with data that supports biblical truth that's been around for thousands of years? How many know God sort of knows what he's doing? He does. He's sort of got this thing called life figured out. He knows what's going to lead to a fulfilling life for us. He knows what's going to make us happy. He knows what causes us to be anxious and uptight and worry about things. He knows all of that. And so a lot of us, I submit, have wasted a lot of energy trying to get what we all want the wrong way. Did you catch that? We're trying to get what we want the wrong way by keeping what we have and by working hard to accumulate even more. We think that if I work harder and I accumulate more and I pad my accounts and I have more investments and I have more savings, I'm going to be more secure, I'm going to be happier, I'm going to be more fulfilled, my relationships will be stronger, I'm going to live with a greater sense of purpose, I'm going to walk in better health because then I'm relaxed and then I can just sort of take a deep breath and then begin to serve others and give of my time and my resources. And it's the opposite of that. In fact, Mark 8:35 said, if you try to keep your life to yourself, for yourself, you will lose it. Jesus said this, by the way, but if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of my good news, of the good news, you will find true life. Here's what Jesus said, real life, are you ready for this, is found in giving your life away. Jesus said that. Many of you have been experiencing that for years. Others of you that have been journeying with us for a short season are now beginning to experience that. And it's a lot of joy that's found in giving your life and your time and your money away in service to God for the benefit of others. Acts 20:35. How many of you know this is something else that Jesus said? There is more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. How many of you could share a personal experience that would support what Jesus said? I can. I can tell you about a time in our life where we had very limited income. Now, most of you know this part of my story. I went to college for business. I was in a business partnership. I was doing great. I was making money. And then God sort of said, I got plans for your life that are different than your plans, and just began to transition me out of business. I sold out, and then in pursuit of this thing called vocational ministry, and in moving in that direction, there was a season where Julie and I were both just working part-time. We didn't have a lot. We weren't on staff at the church yet. We were both working part-time. We were leading a life group in our home that was just blowing up and like overflowing to the point where we had to go to 2 life groups, one evening and one the next evening. It was just a season in our life that was just so fulfilling. And yet money was scarce. And I'll never forget the night that we wrapped up group, and like always, what are we going to eat? And we'd go to the cupboards that were almost bare, and I opened the fridge thinking, at least I'll get, some cold water or something, because we had water and milk in the fridge. That was about all we had in the fridge. And there was a $20 bill laying on the top shelf. To this day, I have no idea who put that $20 there, but I can tell you this. That was our grocery money that week. And man, was that sort of just exciting, that season of life, just trusting God and His provision and somebody being generous toward us. Fast forward the tape a little bit, and we moved into a season where, our income had increased, and we actually had an income. That was pretty cool. And then we were on the side of giving to serve others. And not that we had a lot, but we gave out of what we had. And I'm here to tell you, it really is. There's more happiness in giving than there is in receiving. I know that from experience. Jesus was right. And on the surface, you're saying, Keith, that all sounds crazy, because in the natural, it just doesn't add up. 9 Benjamins is less than 10, Keith. Why are you telling me I'm going to be happier if I give it away? I think I'm going to be happier if I keep it. The data speaks for itself. Empirical research supports what we're talking about here. I'm just saying, how's that working for you? Really? If you were one that was being interviewed and you gave honest answers to the questions, what would it look like in those 5 components that they were measuring the abundant life through? And so all I'm trying to communicate is this. That sounds crazy. It doesn't add up. However, we need to know that there's math and then there's kingdom math. What do I mean by kingdom math? In God's economy, generosity, are you ready for this? Actually is a seed. Let me say that again. In God's economy, generosity is a seed. And how many of you know when you plant a seed, you get a harvest? And so we think if I give like this money away, or if I volunteer my time to serve in this capacity, I'm not going to have as much time, I'm not going to have as much money, so I tighten my belt and I lose out on the life that's on the other side of that because I never put a seed in the ground to reap a harvest. My dad taught me that. I grew up on a farm. And I had chores from the time I was a little kid. So I got an allowance, and I won't bore you with that. And he taught me a lot about good financial practices. But one thing he taught me about this seed thing, because I got lazy one night because I was in a hurry to get to a basketball game. And I thought, well, I had to feed some of the livestock. And so I grabbed a 5-gallon bucket and grabbed some oats out of a wagon that was sitting in the barn as opposed to going all the way to the storage bin. And I thought, it's going to save me time. And about the next day or two, he noticed that some of the seed or the oats out of that wagon, it was gone. And he asked me, point blank, he said, "Did you use the oats in that wagon to feed the livestock?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" He goes, "Young man, you need to learn something. That's our seed oats, and if you feed all of that, we're not going to have any to put in the ground next year, and we'll never have a harvest." Boom. Nailed me. I was probably 9, 10 years old at the time, but I got it. I got it. The law of sowing and reaping. And so here's the kingdom math, 2 Corinthians 9:6. Remember this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Farmers, get this. What we reap is based upon what we sow. And so here's what I want to say. The power of giving is this, friends. Our giving today positions us to capitalize on tomorrow's opportunities. Think about it with me. Our giving today positions us to capitalize on tomorrow's opportunities. If I put seed in the ground today, I'm going to have and be better positioned to reap a harvest tomorrow. Some people talk about being a strategist. I want to be an opportunist. I want to position myself where I can take advantage of opportunities that present themselves, and that is my strategy. It's one thing to be a strategist. It's another thing to be an opportunist. Think about trees. How many have trees somewhere close to where you live? And how many of you like those big trees that actually provide shade, especially in the heat in the summer of Colorado? You know what I'm talking about? And so would you agree with me, unless you're like 100 years old, that somebody else probably put the seed in the ground to grow that tree so you could live under its shade? We need to be thinking generationally. What are we doing today to plant seeds that others can sit in the shade of tomorrow? We should be thinking about not just our kids, but our kids' kids. And so 2 Corinthians 9, reading on from verse 6, now let's go to verses 10 and 11. You see, he says this: God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, who he provides what? Seed to the sower. Seed to who? The sower. He assumes that we're going to plant seed because he knows that if we don't plant seed, we'll never have a harvest. So God provides seed. He calls us sowers. He provides seed to the sower and bread for food. In other words, did you catch it? He provides seed for the sowing and bread for the eating. But if you, like I gave the illustration my dad taught me, if I eat my seed, I'm not going to have a harvest. Some of you are eating all your seed. And you're wondering, where's the harvest? He said, now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed. He'll increase what? Your store of seed, and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. Here's a line that I love, a verse that I love. And you will be made rich in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. How many of you are like me? You have both hands up and say, I want to be at a place where I can be generous on every occasion. I mean, every occasion. Not just, well, I wish I could give. Because here's what I believe. I believe that for the true believer, it is in their heart to give. It is. It's not a lack of want, it's a lack of resource. Because maybe we've got to learn something about this law. And so how many of you are at that place? You're saying, Keith, I want to be able to give generously on every occasion. So the first benefit of why we give, we grow, we benefit, we get better. The second is others benefit. And that may go without saying, but let's talk about it briefly. When we take your gifts to those who need them, they will break out into thanksgiving to God. So are you ready for this? He said 2 good things happen when you do this. The needs of the Christians in Jerusalem be met, because he wrote 2 entire chapters here. I should have given you some backdrop and backstory on this. Paul wrote in his second letter to the Church of Corinth 2 entire chapters on giving financially. Can I just clear the air? Don't read into this something that's not there and say, well, it could be money, it could be your time. Yeah, it could be, but this text is all about money. And he's saying, when we take your gifts to those who need them, they will break out into thanksgiving to God. So 2 good things will happen. The needs of the Christians in Jerusalem would be met, and they will joyfully express their thanksgiving to God. So a few weeks ago, we talked about the impact that your giving is having locally and globally when you give to 3D Church. When you give to 3D Church, the first dime of every dollar you give, we give away, locally and globally. Our strategic partners, you can listen to that message, Vision Sunday a few weeks ago. If you want more detail, we can give you the specifics of that and the ROI, because we view ourselves as the leaders of 3D, as kingdom brokers. You don't have the time, nor even maybe the desire, to sort through all the different ministry opportunities that are out there, locally and globally. We'll do that heavy lifting for you so that you know when you give and you return to God the tithe and give offerings, that first dime of every dollar goes to these strategic partners. We have the greatest ROI possible, locally, nationally, and internationally. And so, my point here is simply this. And last week, can I just say, we provided yet another opportunity for you to give to families in need that live literally just 10 to 15 minutes from right here. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, that just that close to what looks like an incredibly resource-rich environment, there are scores of families, a school called Independence Elementary School that we partner with, where 83% of the children in that school are on the free and reduced lunch program. And that's 10, and we put all those names out on the Christmas tree out there, and it was amazing. We only had like 1 week to get it all taken care of because of the timing of receiving it and then returning the gifts to the school teachers for distribution. And by the way, that's our strategy. You're saying, why didn't we get to deliver them? Because we want to set the teachers up to be the heroes. Come on, somebody. We want the teachers to be the heroes. They're the ones that have to work with them every day. See, I've learned a lot from some of our strategic partners like Compassion International and One Hope. The CEO, president of both those organizations say this, and I'll never forget it, said, I don't care if you use Apple or a Dell, we're content being the Intel chip inside. At 3D Church, can I tell you, we're okay being the Intel chip inside. Let the teachers be the heroes. Let the local indigenous people in other countries be the heroes. Let them get the credit for what we gave, but all of a sudden they get, if there is any, the glory. Because they're the ones that have to live with it every day. And so we just like to feed systems that are making a difference. And all I wanted to say about this, I got distracted a little bit by my abundant thinking. See, I give so much away, I just keep reaping all the time. Anyway, here's my point. Within 1 week, you took every name off of that tree, and all those gifts are returned, and all those gifts are distributed, and some kids that wouldn't have had a good Christmas are going to have a great Christmas because of you. I just want to say I'm honored to lead a very generous church. From day one, yeah, I mean that. I mean that. From day one, 3D Church has been self-supporting. From day one. That is a very unique statistic in the church planting world. That's because of you. Another way in which your giving benefits others is that it becomes a source of encouragement and motivates them to get in on the fun and begin giving. 2 Corinthians 9, 1 and 2. I really don't need to write to you about the gift for the Christians in Jerusalem, for I know that how eager you are to help. Listen to this. I know how eager you are to help, and I have been boasting to our friends in Macedonia that you Christians in Greece were ready to send an offering a year ago. In fact, it was this enthusiasm that stirred up many of them to begin helping. Now, many of you inspire me through your generosity. I meant what I just said. And a lot of you I could have invited to share today. However, I've asked one family to come and talk about their journey into the world of generosity. And I want to invite you right now to put your hands together and welcome Paul and Ashley Cook. I told Paul and Ashley before the service, because we always have a huddle before the service, he goes, man, I didn't know we were going to get to ride bikes today. I said, yeah, I'm going to put you on one and Ashley on the other, and you can ride in circles up here like the Shriners in the parade. So we'll do that after they share their story.
No thanks.
No thanks. So real quick, Paul and Ashley, some of us have had, and I mean this, the privilege of being a part of the journey from the very beginning of 3D. However, as you know, we've grown and we have a lot of new families here that maybe don't know you as well. So just give us a little context. Who are you?
Sure. So we've lived here our whole lives. We've basically never even changed zip codes. We were both born here in Aurora. We love it. It's our home. This church we love. It's also our home. But Paul and I met when we were 12 years old in middle school.
8 years ago.
Yeah, that was just not that long ago at all. And if any of you would have told me that I was going to marry the biggest class clown in our school, I would have said, no way. But I'm very thankful that that was God's plan for me, because he's hilarious and does stuff like that all the time. We started dating in high school, and were engaged right after high school, and we were 18 years old, and got married right after that. So we've been married for 11 and a half years, and we have 3 kids. Kason is 5, and he's the sweetest older brother ever. He's going to go to kindergarten next year. Mila is 2, and she's also really sweet, and just as much sassy as she is sweet, so she keeps our family really fun. And
you should see the
like
nonverbals. I hope you can.
Like her dad. She takes after Paul, and then
Sexy Paul.
Yes. And then Nolan is 8 months old, and he's probably bigger than some of the 2-year-olds that go to this church.
And I think your oldest already has a girlfriend.
He does.
Yes.
He will tell you that.
Yeah.
He does. And she's also super sweet.
It's a good thing to say since it's my granddaughter.
Yes. They're adorable together.
Yeah, they are.
They are.
They really are, you guys. That's a whole nother story for another day. When we do our marriage talk, we'll maybe talk about that. But honestly, Paul and Ashley, as long as I've known you, which has been, 4 years now, you've always been generous. That's just how I know you. You've been generous. And I'm not just talking money. You've been generous with your time, your network, relationships, your belongings. More than once, we've asked to borrow your truck, and you're like, hey, Keith, no problem. What else you need? Is there anything else? I mean, that is the posture of your hearts. And how did that happen? That's not everybody.
Yeah, I think there's two parts to that, really. I think the first being we've experienced generosity greatly. First and foremost by God, who's blessed us with all things, right? Our children, our home, our marriage. And then also for me personally, I grew up in a very generous home, right? Both my parents, we didn't come from much, but they were very generous in all those areas as well, right? To your point, generosity is really, the act of kindness, right? And so, money is certainly a part of that and enables that and in a way to be generous, but, your time, your belongings, all of those things are a great opportunity, and that's certainly something that I took from my parents. The second aspect of that would be it's intentional, right? I mean, Ashley and I decided very early on in our marriage that if our family can only be known for one thing, let that be generosity. So
that's amazing, Paul and Ashley, because I would say, there's a lot of things that those of us that know you well would say, man, we admire this, but that you've now verbalized that, I would say, that's true. We know you as being generous. And it's not an act. You said something really, I think, significant there, Paul. You said it's intentional. I would have to agree with that. I don't believe we stumble into generosity, if you know what I mean. We don't become generous by chance, but by choice. So what are some choices that you've made that have led you into a life of generosity?
So we try to go to a marriage conference or retreat every year. We've missed a few, but we try. And the first one that we ever went to, we could actually only afford to go to it because someone gifted it to us. And at first we weren't even sure we wanted to go because we were thinking, oh, this is for people who are either struggling or it's not for people who just got married, right? Which is silly to think. We were also 18. So the speaker there said that if you don't give when you have a little, you won't give when you have a lot. And both of us, that stuck with both of us. It really resonated with both of us. And then when we were talking after, that was what really stuck out in our mind. And I think it stuck out so much because at the time, we had very little.
Right.
We were both working minimum wage jobs. I was working at Starbucks. Paul was working at the airport de-icing airplanes. I think I made less than $10 an hour. I think he made right around there too. And so I think that's why it stuck out to us.
Yeah.
And so in our conversation after that, we got to talk and say, if we start this now, where we are now, because that's who we want to be, right? But it doesn't change just because we feel like we have a little. We can be
Right.
that person now and that couple now, and it can carry on. So we had that conversation very early on, which was awesome.
That's amazing. That is awesome. And so, I just know because of relationship that you guys have a pretty compelling story. Generosity, holistically speaking, but financially, and then tithing in particular. So tell us a little bit about your journey with that.
So we've been going to church since middle school, right? And we've always given something to the church, but it was typically more what was left over, right? And even well into our marriage, right? It wasn't until recent, probably within the last 4 years, that we really started learning the principles of the first fruit, the first tenth, even learning the differences between, a tithe and an offering. And I can recall at this time we were very, very in debt, right? And we
Like-
6 figures in debt.
Okay.
Right. So, and we were, there were nights we couldn't sleep, right? We were sick to our stomachs. How do we get out of this mess that we built for ourselves, right? And I remember we were sitting at the kitchen table, and we had our little Excel spreadsheet open, going over our budget, and we were like, this is crazy. Like, we're never going to get out of this on our own, right? Like, we've got to fix something. And that's when we had a very intentional discussion of, we need to change what we're doing from a tithing perspective, and we need to start giving our first tenth and live off of our 90%. And that was right around 4 years ago. And fast forward over that 4-year time frame, we paid off my truck this year, which was the last thing that we had. So we're completely debt-free, have that financial freedom now. So it was certainly took time, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of effort and a lot of, very intentional things. I'd say one of them, 2016, we did Financial Peace University. If you guys haven't done that, I think we're going to be starting one up in the next season of Life Group, not led by us, but led by another couple in the church, and I would highly recommend it. If you haven't done it, or if you've done it a long time ago and want to revisit it, that was probably the Kickstarter into really getting out of the debt, aspect. But and then the other big, aspect there was we were very faithful into sticking to our first fruits, and we are 100% confident that that faithfulness was returned to us, because of that. And so year over year, my income significantly increased, more than doubled since 4 years ago. So I would say that both Ashley and I, as we were preparing for this and kind of talking through it, we kind of like revisited some of those spreadsheets, and we're like, man, it's 100%, the fruit of the faithfulness there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't know if you guys caught that, but 4+ years ago, 6 figures of debt. Today, debt-free and making more than twice as much as they were 4 years ago with just on Paul's income. Will you guys just honor them with some applause and celebration? Because that didn't happen by choice, or by chance, but by choice, and that's the whole idea here. So one last question, and then we'll wrap it up. How has this decision to live a generous life impacted you personally?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it very well earlier, right? I mean, generosity is our happiness, right? I mean, we very much enjoy the act of being kind and teaching that to our kids. I mean, even just this morning, our daughter was asking for a little Kinder Joy egg, right? Which, I mean, they're like $1 at the store, right? And I said, hey, we don't have any of those, right? And then Kason said, Dad, can we stop by Walgreens on the way home? I go, why? He goes, I want to buy Mila a Kinder Joy egg. So, to us, that's kind of the big thing, like seeing, our kids, take after, the kindness and the generosity. That's nothing else can make us more happy. So
Beautiful. Do you want to add anything to that, Ashley?
No, he did good.
All right. Well, again, I just want to affirm you in front of your peers, your church family, for your example, and yet choices that you've made that have led you to where you are. Again, I don't think in any way you got there by chance, but by choice, and you chose Kingdom Math over Math 101 that we learned in school. And so, would you guys again give it up for Paul and Ashley? Thanks, you guys. You can ride the bikes now.
Awesome.
All right. Well, listen, I know that we need to wrap it up here and move into our response time, so let me just give you a couple of quick thoughts. The third one is, because I know for some of you to be able to sleep well tonight, you've got to have all your blanks filled in. And so we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that your giving benefits you, your giving benefits others, but ultimately we need to know that our giving glorifies God. I mean, we have to know that. God is glorified in our giving. He said in 2 Corinthians 9, he said, when we take your gifts to those who need them, they will break out into thanksgiving to God. You will be glorifying God through your generous gifts. For your generosity to them will prove that you are obedient to the good news of Christ. Isn't he saying, what's he saying? He's saying your generosity substantiates your faith. It's sort of like you're putting your money where your mouth is. It supports what you say you believe. And so as followers of Christ, I think the ultimate outcome of everything we say or do should honor God. And when it does, he releases his favor into every area of our life. So let me just give you one point of application today. And it's real simple. It's easy to state. It may be more challenging to do, but it's this. Resolve to be generous. Just resolve to be generous. Draw a line in the sand today and say, you know what? I've heard enough. I want the 5 benefits of a generous life, and I resolve today I'm going to be generous. Now, Isaiah said, generous people plan to do what is generous. Generous people plan to do what is generous. And so at some point we just make that decision. But what's that look like practically? 2 Corinthians 9, 7, 8. You must each decide in your heart how much to give. And so here's how it works. Listen to me. Remember what Paul and Ashley said about their journey and their story? It's not by chance, but by choice that they ended up where they are. I want to say this. When it comes to generosity, we have to pre-decide. Or we should actually, let me say it this way. We need to decide to pre-decide to be generous. We should decide to pre-decide to give. In other words, generous people plan ahead. And they're real simple today because of time. 3 expressions of generosity. 3 expressions of generosity. The first is systematic generosity. In other words, you begin with the basics. We can't grow to a place where we excel at something until we get the basics down, right? And so the basics, like tithing, is giving 101. In fact, the writers of the book, The Paradox of Generosity, used that as the benchmark to determine when somebody had moved from ungenerous to generous. If they hadn't reached that point, they didn't fit into the class of the generous. And they wrote this book not from a position as Christians, but from a position as researchers. And the empirical research supports that whole idea. And so the first step is to return to God what belongs to Him. And before I spend any on me, I'm going to honor God first. It's the principle of first fruits that Paul referenced when he was up here, often called the tithe. Now let me give you this on the tithe. The tithe means a tenth, literally, but it actually, in this context, literally means the first tenth. So it's not just a tenth, it's the first tenth. And so the first thing I do when I get paid is I return the first tenth to God. And by the way, the tithe is a unit. How many of you know a unit? You can't take one of those Benjamins that we showed on the screen and say, well, I'm gonna give 50 of it to my mom and 50 of it to my dad for Christmas and tear it in half. You can't tear the tithe in half. It's a unit. And it's given it's the first tenth. And most believe that it belongs, as it says here in the text from Malachi, in the local storehouse, which is your local place of worship. He says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. If you do, says the Lord, I will open the windows of heaven for you. I'll pour out so much blessing. It's so great. You won't have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. And so tithing doesn't make sense if you're rich. Would you agree? And would you agree tithing doesn't make sense if you're broke? Like Paul and Ashley, 6 figures in debt, both making $10 an hour. Why would we give away 10%? Because conventional wisdom says if I give away one of those Benjamins, 9 is less than 10. In kingdom math, he says if you'll give that first and return it to me, then you're going to have more. And he invites us, the one place the creator of the universe invites us to put him to the test, it's in the area of our finances. And I'm just saying, do it. Now, you're saying, well, Keith, I can't afford to give. Maybe I'll start in January. Let me get through Christmas, and then I'll start being generous. Then I'll start honoring God. That's like if you're drowning, and I come along to offer you like a raft, and I'm like, got a raft for you. You're like, no, wait till I get to the shore. I'm going to might not make it to the shore. In other words, you start now. You're drowning. You're already in debt. Don't wait another 3 weeks. Let it begin today. Now, some of you are saying, well, Keith, that's a lot of money. I'm on the other side of that. I don't have a 6-figure debt. I have a 6-figure plus income. You do the math on that. That's a lot of money. All I can say about that is this. Let me offer to pray for you before you leave today, and I'll pray for you the way John Maxwell did when he led a church in California for some businessman that came up to him who'd been a part of his church for years. He told him about tithing, and he came forward and he said, Pastor, will you pray for me? He said, God's been really good to me, and I've been honoring him, and yet you spoke on tithing again today. And he says, man, it's really hard for me to tithe. Can you pray for me that I'd be able to afford to tithe again? And John said, sure. He said, why don't we kneel right here in front of, what he called an altar. And they knelt down, and he put his hand on his shoulder. He says, Father, I just pray for Joe that you'd reduce his income to a level where he'd be able to afford to tithe again. You got it, didn't you? Some of you grew up hearing about tithing and have faithfully practiced that for years, and yet here you are years later, still at the same level. What else in your life do you do that way? Just plateau and stay. In other words, if we want to grow, we have to move from the basics. And so tithing is giving 101. Then the Bible, as Paul referenced, distinguishes between tithes and offerings. An offering is above and beyond the tithe, and that leads to the second type of giving. It's spontaneous. Proverbs 22:9. He who has a generous eye will be blessed. How many? You may be a coach and have an eye for talent. Or do we have any coaches of athletics out there, like basketball, softball, volleyball, golfing? I don't know if that's a sport, but anyway. And if you are for one of the schools or at a university level, how many know you have an eye for talent? You just see talent. And he says here, he who has a generous eye will be blessed. Some people have an eye for seeing needs and meeting needs. And all I'm trying to communicate here is this. It's called your RAS, your reticular activating system. Once it's been set in motion, you just go there by default. You see need and you think, oh, I could help with that. And you move to generosity, not judgment of those in need. And so you pre-decide to give above and beyond the tithe. That's spontaneous. That's given generously. And then finally is sacrificial. David said, I will not give that which cost me nothing. I won't read it because of time, but 2 Corinthians 8, part of the whole storyline we've been drawing from today, Paul wrote this in the last verse. In verse 5, he said, and they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us in keeping with God's will. And so all this talk about generosity and sacrificial giving, can I just submit to you that God is the ultimate giver? Talk about sacrificial giving. How many know that God, John 3:16, how many know that verse? So loved, greatest lover, that he gave, greatest giver, his best, his only begotten Son. He didn't give the leftovers. He gave himself. He gave his best. And he invites us to do the same because the Bible says that Jesus, being the first fruits of God, guaranteeing our future inheritance, and he invites us into the world of generosity with him. And so let's pray. Father, we thank you for your presence here, that you really are a God of the impossible, that Christmas and Christianity are really all about giving and generosity. And so, Father, I'm asking today that independent of where we're at, even spiritually, honestly, based upon biblical truth and empirical research, we would resolve today to be generous. And then you would show us what that looks like in our life. Show us today what our part is in building for the future, knowing that our giving today is what positions us to take advantage of opportunities tomorrow. And so, Lord, may the spirit of Christmas, the spirit of giving, arrest us and move us to be generous like you. In Jesus' name.